เ here. We're live.
Good evening.
There he is. Well, hello, everybody. I see that we've got a good number of people already filling up the chat room here, but I'm Bo Thompson, and Pete Kaliner is with me, and this is the second annual WBT Talktoberfest, and let me be the first to welcome Pete Kaliner to the mix of the Talktoberfest world. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Am I doing this correctly? I'm not drunk, despite my best efforts at drinking all day. But no, I'm not drunk. I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not allowed to no alcohol on the PhD weight loss thing. So, but doing very well. And I see a lot of people saying hi in the chat. So I guess you want to run through and just welcome everybody. We got Michael and Kathy and Brian and Sarah, Ray, Nicholas, Jerry, Christy. And let's see here, Terry, Alex, Eugene, what's going on, everybody? And Raina, and I think I got everybody there so far. And I saw this, Bo. So, I mean, we kind of talked earlier, like maybe just make it an Ask Me Anything. And so Sarah, just right out of the gate, apparently has some background info on Bo. A woman by the name of Joyce McSpadden used to brag about you. Do you know this name?
Oh, yeah, I haven't. She was the internship teacher coordinator at Myers Park High School when I was there. And I can't believe that this is wild. Yeah, I read it. It says, Joyce McSpadden used to brag on you all the time when I joined the internship program. She said, after you completed your internship hours at WBT, you never left. that's pretty true. A few years later, they decided they should start paying you. Is this true? Yes. What I should say about that is there are a couple of things. By the way, Sarah, thanks for being here and thanks for bringing that up. Pete and I talked about, a loose blueprint of what we might bring up tonight, in addition to what you all might ask. And I certainly didn't expect to see this, but it's a throwback. So when I was at Myers Park, I talk on the air a lot about starting at BT when I was in high school. And so that is true. I was 16 and I came over. I knew somebody at my church knew some of the radio out at One Julian. People may remember Bob Inman, who used to be the lead anchor at WBTV. I knew Bob from church. So Bob invited me out to watch the 6 o'clock news one night because he was the anchor. And I said, hey, this TV stuff's pretty cool, but can you walk me down the hall? I want to see the radio stuff. And so he did. And down the hall was Henry Bogan and Mike Collins doing a show. And I met them. And Collins was the program director back then. So I got to talking to him and I said, hey, can I just come out here and watch? You can't, don't worry about paying me. I just want to come out and watch what you do in your show. And he said, yeah. And so long story short, as if it's not long already, I basically came out every Friday after school for probably a year and a half and just stood in the corner. And they finally said, hey, if you're going to stand in the corner, let's make yourself useful. And they gave me a part-time job. Well, meanwhile, at the school, I had not signed up for an internship program, but I met this lady, Joyce McSpadden, and she said, well, you do realize you can get credit for this. And usually the internship program at Myers Park, or at least back then, was only a semester credit. But we sat down and tallied all the hours that I had been at WBT, and basically I got a whole year's credit out of it. So yeah, I did an internship and I was sort of awarded it after the fact. But the story about me never leaving is pretty much true. I left and went to school in college for 1 year away, and then I came back and transferred to Davidson. And Davidson was right down the road, so I worked part-time while I was there. And when I graduated, I ended up with a full-time job. But that is, I would say, 95% true, just leaving out some details. But Sarah, yes, I remember Ms. McSpadden. I like it was yesterday, and that's very cool that you would bring that up. Thank you.
So it is also a story that's pretty common in radio. People who just show up, and I'll never forget, like Neil Bortz's story, the former talk show host. We used to carry Neil Bortz on WBT back before he retired years ago. And his story of how he got into radio was that he literally heard that their morning guy or something on the local station had, I believe he had committed suicide. And so Bortz just went down to the station, showed up and said, I'm your guy. I mean, that's just like, that's people in this industry. That's how they they get into this industry. They just hang around and eventually somebody pays them. It seems like, I mean, everybody, I think, has a story of working long hours, interning for long hours, and doing it for nothing just because they love the business. And so actually, so Bo, I had a question. It kind of dovetails into what Sarah asked. So if you weren't doing radio, what would you be doing? What do you think you would be doing if not radio? Would it be TV? Because I know you did a stint in television.
I'm a media fanatic, so maybe television, but I got to be honest with you, Pete. You and I worked down the hall from a TV station, and nothing against WBTV or any other TV station. I went into TV about 13 years ago out of necessity because I couldn't find a radio job at the time. I had gone to a smaller station and went looking for radio jobs, and there wasn't one that I found in Charlotte. So I basically knew a couple of people over at WCCB who had been ex-radio guys, and they got me an interview with the news director over there. But essentially, I was hired to produce a show over there that was essentially talk radio on TV.
Yeah.
I liked it, but the whole time I was there, I felt like I was kind of a fish out of water. Like, as Rush used to say, he was doing it with one arm tied behind his back just to make it fair. I felt like I had an arm tied behind my back, and I couldn't do anything with it. It was all these new skills that I felt like my radio career, what was this all for? In the end, I can say that I liked TV okay. I just felt like in radio, it's immediate. If you and I want to do something, if we want to take a phone call, we take a phone call on a whim. If we want to play a bumper, I've got my computer. I can call it up right there. I can do what I want within seconds. In TV, and you know this, you have an idea. That idea has to start 2 or 3 hours before it ever hits the air. It has to go through several departments. And I was too impatient for TV. But that said, I guess if I weren't in radio, it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever really thought about that question because since I could think clearly, I was fascinated with this. And if I did anything else, it would be temporary in order to get back to radio, which is what TV was. So that's the answer to that question. I want to turn it around and say something before we get into some of these, because I see a lot of good questions over here, but I want to say something. And by the way, if you're watching this tonight, you probably already know when you can hear us on the radio, but just so everybody is starting from the same place, I host the mornings on WBT from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. And of course, Pete is in middays now from noon to 3 and doing great things. And I'm really excited about where the radio station is right now. But I was particularly excited about the prospect of when Pete, when you were hired, you and I have something in common in that we sort of cut our teeth here at this station. And then we went away. And I think both of us, and we've had this conversation between each other from time to time, I think we both knew we sort of had to go away to come back. And I don't know about you. I always hoped I'd come back here someday when I left in 2005. And I did in 2012. But I also knew that I needed to leave in order to go work on skills that I would need to ultimately come back and doing what I'm doing right now. And so I did that in my own way, and you did it. And now here in 2021, as we're on the doorstep of this station turning 100 years old, you got two guys on the air, one in the morning and one in the middays, prime time. And this is where we came up. And you and I know the station well. We paid our dues here. And I think, to me, that's kind of symbolic and it's a source of pride. So yeah. I think you and I have that connection that I think is an unusual thing in radio in this day and age.
It is. Well, it is very unusual that for people to work in radio and not to move around. I've moved around a little bit. I think you have a couple times as well, but nothing like you've heard. I'm sure, people who are in this business that move all over the place over, 20, 30 years. And so for that, I mean, I don't know if that's a product of, there not being a whole lot of radio jobs around anymore. But with consolidation over the last 30 years and such, and technological advances. But yeah, and the thing is, if you had told me, in 2011, when I left BT, the first time, and said that I would be sitting here again, I would have thought you're crazy. You've seen the movie Charlie Wilson's War with Tom Hanks and Philip Seymour Hoffman. He tells him the story, we'll see, talking about, what you think right now is terrible news or really good news, we'll see. It might not be. And yeah, like the things, what did Hancock call it, is time out from WBT as well. And and we kind of come back and hopefully learned something, made a bunch of mistakes someplace else, so everyone in Charlotte will think I'm just perfect and you're perfect, and that's that'll be the legacy. We'll see.
Well, you went and did radio in Asheville and were very successful there, and people may remember Danny Fontana. Danny Fontana has passed away. He passed away in 2015. Danny had a show here on BT. He did mornings with Al Gardner for a while. Danny left in the early 2000s and went and bought a station in Kings Mountain and upped the power on that station, and then bought a studio space, if you know where the Plaza building is in Uptown Charlotte, built a really nice facility in the Plaza building, like a Today Show set.
We were so jealous. We were so jealous of that studio, of the way it looked right there in Center City. It was great.
It's the funniest thing because we planted, for about 3 years, Pete, it was the most fun I've ever had in radio. Yeah. But I also sort of knew that it was built a bit on a house of cards, and I didn't know the economy was going to tank the way it did. Nobody could have seen that in full bloom, but that ultimately is one of the things that contributed to the downfall of that place. But for a while there, we had a Today Show style set. We had hired, I was there, John Moore, many people know, who works with me, was over there. We had John Robinson and Bill Rosinski, and of course Danny. But one of the things we used to do is we had speakers that we put, like Ron Tollison built that studio. Ron put speakers in the bushes, and so we could turn the speaker on. We would talk to people as they were coming by, and that was one of the playing sound effects as people were walking by when the show was off the air. But anyway, I digress about. But we went away and we came back, and it's a cool thing to be where we are now. And like I said, we're heading into a very important year for the station, the 100th year, and very few people get to be part of a station's lineup in the 100th year of a station. Yeah. Quite sure you and I probably won't ever do this again, but how great a responsibility it is to be, leading this station with you. I'm excited about it. And I see a number of people here asking questions, and I had the McSpadden one. Somebody asked me and said, are you going to show us your puppy? And actually, I hadn't thought about that. I think what I might do in a minute is text one of my kids to get them to bring maybe the dog down here, and Phyllis can make a cameo in the broadcast.
There you go.
So let's see.
Let me say, I'll say hello here to Billy and Catherine and Joseph from Hickory, and producer here. We had some technical difficulties. Thank you to everybody for your patience. We appreciate that. And Bob and Alex, what's a couple of your favorite restaurants in Charlotte? I think he's asking you that, Bo. I think that question went to you.
Favorite restaurants. I've always been a huge fan of Harper's. I'm a simple guy. I love Harper's over at South Park. I still do. I liked Harper's when they had the other location over on Woodlawn, but that's long since gone. My wife and I love the Fig Tree restaurant. That's a staple if we're going out somewhere really nice. My wife loves Mama Ricotta's over on Kings Drive.
Of course.
And, yeah. You know what else I love? I mean, it's talk about simple. I still love Shomar's. George Kuchel and his legendary place. I mean, different restaurants for different moods, but those are some of mine. What about you?
Well, so now part of the problem, not problem, but one of the things is coming back to town, trying to find the restaurants that are still around. We moved into an apartment down here right now while our house is getting built, and we're right around the corner, like we're within walking distance of Firebirds. And Christy, my wife, loved Firebirds. I'd never eaten there before we got back, and so that's a mainstay for us. Gosh, I mean, simple guy as well, I guess. I mean, we used to live down in Steel Creek. I love Jim and Nick's, the barbecue joint, and Mac's Speed Shop. I mean, those were just great places for, like you said, the that kind of food. Shomar's I used to eat when I was, before city council meeting or something. I'd had, because that was like the only restaurant near the station, pre-Pinky's, which is good too. But pre-Pinky's, that was it. And there was a place, Christy and I, when we wanted to go out for someplace fancy, it was called Lulu. It was a French joint, and it was right like down near Thomas Street Tavern. And I think they closed down, though. I think they're not there anymore. So I'm still trying to find restaurants that survived COVID over the last year. And that's but I mean, it's just amazing coming back through and like driving down these roads and seeing all of the development, all the housing and projects that have gone up. I mean, it really is amazing in that I remember sitting in the city council meetings 20 years ago and them going through these plans saying, this is the vision for what we want Charlotte to be. And now here I am driving down the road. And it's like, I mean, for all the grief, I've said this before, for all the grief that WBT gave Pat McCrory, first off, I guess he gets the last laugh in that he was on the air for so long at BT2. But also, he was right. Like the light rail line did spur that kind of development that they were talking about it spurring all along South Boulevard and the South Corridor. He was right.
I saw a question on here. Where's the governor? Well, the governor is busy running for Senate. And of course, he left the show back in April. We had a great run with that show. Very proud of what we did with that show. I like the fact that he still comes back from time to time. In fact, he was here on Thursday. I know he's been on your show too, Pete. Thursday, he'll basically text me and say when he's in town, hey, how about I stop by and we crank up the old show for a couple of hours. And so when it fits the schedules, that's what we do. And he shows up, and for 2 hours, it's the same as it was for 3.5 years. And, I don't know. People ask me a lot, is he ever going to do radio again? Well, it has a lot to do with how this Senate race goes. If he obviously is elected to Senate, then we'll be talking to him in a different way, Pete. But we'll still be talking to him. If he doesn't, if he doesn't win the primary, or he doesn't win the general, then I could very much see him wanting to try radio again, whether it's at WBT. I don't know. He learned how to. You and I both know that in our first stints here, Pat did a 1 hour a week recorded weekend show when he was mayor. It was called The Inside Story with Pat McCrory. But that was a much different ball game. And I told him that when he got here. I said, this everyday thing is a lot different. And, I've told you, Pete, in our private conversations, and people have heard me talk about on the air, we had about a 6 month to a year period where he was kind of learning the ropes, and he had the stories and he had the experience and the know-how, and I had the radio experience, and we kind of took a while to merge that, but we got into a really nice rhythm. So I had a ball. And if it ends up being that he comes back into the private sector and wants to do radio again, I'm sure the station and we'll all, we'll entertain that idea when we get there. But right now, you all know that he left to go run for Senate. So we're all following along together.
Yeah. Well, and I remember the first time when he started doing that weekend show, and it was, here comes look at that. What an adorable puppy. This isn't fair. We don't have any pets anymore.
All right. Somebody asked.
He brought in a ringer.
Phyllis was going to make an appearance, and we have this game that we play with Phyllis right now. We call it Kiss or Bite. So you go like this, and you're either going to get a lick, like up. See, she's being nice for the radio crowd. And you never know. You get a. But here she is. Yeah. See. Yeah. She's going to get restless. See, she's being really good, but she won't stay this way for long. So,
what kind of dog is she?
This is a miniature schnauzer.
Okay.
She's the third one we've had, and we've had her for I guess a couple of months now. But she is I tell you what, it's not quite like having a kid again, but it's close. So there's Phyllis, everybody. Thank you for asking, and we will let her go back to mom for a little while.
She's adorable. Was it intimidating at all to step into Rush's time slot? Just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. And that's the thing. I tried to make this very clear, and I appreciate the way BT did it, because, and to this extent also, like the guys that are doing the show now, that's tough. Those guys, it's John Hancock said it best, as he often does, which is, I don't want to be the guy that comes after the legend. I want to be the guy that comes after the guy that came after the legend, because no one's going to be the legend. And maybe some of this is different because Limbaugh was such a legend in that nobody ever expects you to be him, because how could you, right? He was it. And so, and everybody in this, I don't care what you're doing, even people that are in a news department. I used to have this argument with a former colleague who was a tad left of center, and tried to impress upon him that, like, you would not have this job but for Rush Limbaugh. Now, okay, I may have been saying some of that in order to kind of needle him a little bit, but it's true. Limbaugh basically created this this format, and I think it's up to everybody who has benefited from that to try to carry that on. Will it be the same? It can't be the same. And I fully acknowledge I'm not and could never be Limbaugh, and nor would I ever try to be, because why would you try to be somebody you're not? It's that's one of the things I think that people recognized about him too, is that, like, after he died, I actually did an interview with a fella. He goes by the name of Bob Lee, named after the movie or the book, the sniper movie. But he does a blog called Bob Lee Says, and he actually was friends with Limbaugh back before Limbaugh made it big, and he lives in Raleigh now. And his wife was the North Carolina mistress. Do you ever hear Limbaugh talk about the North Carolina mistress? That was Bob Lee's wife, who grew up with Rush. Rush introduced this guy to his wife, and they live in Raleigh. And she was the one who created every single day the stack of stuff for him and would send it down to him. And she was a producer, basically a show prep producer for him for all those years. And it was real interesting talking to him about how Limbaugh modeled so much of what he does, what he did, off of the World Wrestling. They would sit around and watch wrestling, and they loved the over-the-top bombast. And so the people who listened to Limbaugh for a long period of time, I think everybody kind of just understood that that's what he would do. That was part of his, I don't want to say shtick, but it was part of his personality, because in real life, like, he wasn't, every story you hear people tell, like, he wasn't that way toward, with other people. He was just a regular guy. And, I don't know. I think it makes it easier to some extent, because I don't have to try to live up to that, because there's no way you could. But yeah, it's a little intimidating to do the 9 or the noon to 3 shift, because it's like, yeah, you're up against these other guys that now are in Limbaugh's seat, and these national syndicated people. And yeah, I mean, people have a lot of options. So I just keep doing what I do, and hopefully there's a demand for that supply, and we shall see. So fingers crossed. And I'm not fired yet. So that's,
hey, I know I speak for a lot of people who are online here that you're doing an incredible job, and it's not an easy job. One thing I will say about Rush, and also about the Pat McCrory show, in the case of both, listeners, you all know why the changes were made in each case. It wasn't because the station decided they wanted to get rid of anybody on the air. Rush Limbaugh passed away, and we all knew he was in fading health. So all of us sort of knew that this day was coming. So you knew that every station was going to have to decide how to go forward. And, there was radio before Rush in Charlotte. It was local. It's one of my favorite trivia questions. The last show to be in Rush's spot before Rush was Mike and Barbara McKay.
Right? Mike Collins?
No, Mike and Barbara McKay.
Oh, Mike. Okay.
And then before that, Henry Bogan actually spent some time in the midday. So Mike Collins was in the afternoon. He was right after Rush, and he also did mornings. But, change is inevitable. We knew there was going to be all stations who carried Rush knew that someday that was coming. None of us wanted it. I mean, Rush, for the many of the reasons you talked about, to me, Rush is the godfather for many reasons. I never even, Rush was never about politics to me. He was about radio mechanics. And to me, he's the best that's ever done it. And the way that you know that is he's the one guy that I can think of that did 3 hours a day and can do it with nothing. He didn't need production. He didn't need guests. He didn't need callers. He used them sometimes, but Rush was the show. And that's not to say that he didn't use production elements, because I loved that about him. But what I'm getting at is Rush did it all. I was always fascinated by Rush, how he built everything into that show. But anyway, we knew that this time was going to come. And we also, with Pat McCrory, you all know that we did not fire Pat McCrory. Pat decided he wanted to run for governor or for senator. And so he decided to leave. And so we obviously made some changes in my show. We made a change in middays by moving on to whatever the next thing was. And so, the stations had to work through that. But I think back to noon to 3 right now, I think it's a really great time for us to be local all the hours that we are. And it reinforces the importance of a station like this being local and talking about local things and talking about national things. You've got a guy after you who worked for Rush Limbaugh. And the fact that Winterble is here and is that sort of, you realize Brett Winterble was the last local guy that Rush tapped to fill in for him while he was alive. Brett Winterble will always have the ability to say that, and he has that relationship. And so I feel like here we have you doing middays, noon to 3, and bringing a local flavor back and an experience with not just Charlotte, but also this radio station. And then you have Brett Winterble, doing what he's doing in the afternoon and having great success. And he is that legacy that really very few stations in the entire country can say that they have now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he also has been around in all these different markets, that gives you a better sense of the country. When you work in different places, you obviously learn about those places. And so that's one of the benefits of being sort of the nomad radio person, right? Is that you learn a lot about different regions of America, and they are different. People are different in different parts of the country. So there's definitely a lot of experience. And as I said, I think it was the day when they made the announcement, somebody is going to figure out, like you said, this is always changing. There are some things that are constant in spoken word format in talk radio, but there are some things that aren't. They're going to change. And I spent the last year and a half doing podcasts, and that you're talking about an explosion of content. And I tell everybody, try it. Right? People are like, oh, I've thought about doing a podcast. Do it. And you never know. You might actually be very good at it. And then you parlay that into this, right? That's the idea, because you got to get a start someplace. You can't all get an internship unpaid for 5 years like Bo did. That's just not tenable for most people. So here's a question. Who's the one that got away at BT, a show host? And the one that comes to my mind, and I don't know if it's got away, but Jason Lewis, because he went on and went syndicated. After he left, he went back to Minnesota, right? Were you here when Jason was here?
Yeah, Jason was here several different times. Jason was first here,
that's right,
early 90s. So if I'm remembering this correctly, Jason came to Charlotte because his wife at the time was hired by Channel 3 as a news anchor. I believe it was Madeline McFadden, if I'm remembering that correctly. But so Jason came to Charlotte with her, having done talk radio. And I remember when he got here and they put him on late at night. He was on from 11 to 2. And then he hit the ground. When he got on the air, people knew, okay, this guy has been around the block and knows what he's doing. And then he left. And then he came back again in the late 90s for another stint. And then he left. And then when Spires and Krantz, when that show ended in the early 2000s, then Jason came in and he did Afternoon Drive, and he did it for the longest that he had been. He had sort of been a quasi fill-in host almost, or in late at night, and he preceded Jerry Klein, which is an odd thing to think about. But so Jason was here several different times, but I have to agree with you. I saw that pop up in the side, and I'm thinking back. I can think of a lot of local people who.
What about Michael Graham? And he's gone on to do great things. Jeff Katz went on. He's up in Richmond now. I mean, BT has had a lot of high quality talent. I don't know why I'm here, but they have. Yeah, it's great history.
Well, I'm sorry, not Jerry. Jason Lewis, probably the most successful guy who went on from here to do other things. And I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody because he's not the only one. But I think maybe let me answer the question from my standpoint. Maybe not the one that got away, but the one that could have been so much more. I think was Spires and Krantz.
Yeah,
that show to me was only on for 2 or 3 years. But I was doing a podcast the other day with one of our former general managers, Rick Jackson. It's a Century podcast series that I do that some of you may be familiar with. If you're not, I hope you check it out because it's about the history of the station and a lot of the stuff we're talking about. But he brought up that show, and he and I were essentially saying that show was short-lived and it kind of imploded because of I'm not going to get into why it imploded. But
it was I call it lightning in a bottle. They caught lightning in a bottle, and there's the downside to that is it goes boom at some point. And yeah, I mean, it really was, hey, let's throw this guy with that guy and see what happens. And oh my gosh, it was fantastic. And then it just kind of, it blew up.
Well, and people know John Moore, who works with me now. John was the producer of that show. And the combination of Richard and Brad and John Moore, and many of you may remember Brad and Britt, the second incarnation of Brad Krantz on the radio station. Britt Whitmire was his co-host, and Brad and Britt had done radio all over the place. But Spires and Krantz, by chance, were here on the same day and were put together by one of our former program directors, Randall Bloomquist. And Spires and Krantz hit it off and had a great show. And then if you remember Bob Hope, who used to call in, and all the voices like Strom Thurmond, that was Britt Whitmire. And so Britt Whitmire was like the secret sauce to that show. And you had John Moore behind the board, and you had Brad and Richard. I was listening to an excerpt from it the other day because I was looking for a soundbite for one of these anniversary projects that I'm working on. And I was sitting in the car listening to, I mean, this was what, 2000, maybe 2001, 2002. And I'm sitting there listening in the car. I'm like, this is every bit as funny today as it was back then. And so that's one of those shows that I would have loved to have seen how much more it could have done, because I think it would have had a great run. But, Pete, radio tends to have a lot of stories like that. When you have people that are put together, sometimes it's lightning in a bottle, and that can be very good, but that can also be very combustible.
Yes, exactly. No, and it's why if you're listening to my show, you hear I actually pay tribute to various hosts through my show, and some of it's just unconscious and some of it is very intentional. When I do the that's the Rolling Stones, well, that's an homage to Spires and Krantz, but that in itself is an homage to Rush, because that's what they were doing. They were paying tribute to Rush Limbaugh because Rush would do that with his bump tunes sometimes. And which again goes to the World Wrestling kind of, bombastic, larger than life kind of thing. I totally stole their the Andy Griffin show. And I would have fun with people up in Asheville when I would mention, and then I would get I'd call it the Andy Griffin show, and they would say, no, it's Andy Griffith, and they would tell me about an episode, and I would say, no, that episode never happened. And I mean, that was the whole bit. And they would string people on for hours doing that stuff. So, and the Larry King Live, hello, that's just those little drops here and there, and right here, that I think I still hear some of that every now and again. Now it would be a ringtone. Now in today's, could you imagine, like today's day and age, all of this stuff would be ringtones. It would be GIFs and memes and moist towelettes to hand out. That's right. Hey, Susan, how are you? Susan Hancock is here. Is there a way to post photos in chat? I don't know if there's a way to post photos. I can say that I do have a photo that I can share that was taken earlier today. If Josh wants to put, there it is. There you go. That's the that's the chair. And let me see if I can let's see here. Can I get it out of the full can I get it out of the full screen?
It's quite a pose you got going on there.
Thank you. Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. Oh, there we go.
No.
There you go. I took multiple shots. I wanted because Pat apparently. All right, so I guess I need to do this. I need to pull up the Twitter now and find out the find his comments to us, because somebody mentioned on the Twitter yesterday, and then it alerted Pat that we were talking about his chair, and he basically screamed at me, "Leave his chair alone." And I'm trying to find it right now, but I think I can give it a better home. I think, and he said then, oh, here it is. I found it. Here we go. He says, he said, I said, I'm taking it. And he says, the chair is reserved for the Scott Paget studio at Lake Jimmy.
Well, if that's the case, then why isn't it there? See,
that's a very good question.
Here's the thing. I was talking about this morning. I don't know if you heard this, but you brought it up yesterday. So I went back and found the day, because I remember, I have it on my computer. I save stuff like that. And it was a couple of years ago. And we get on the air one morning and he starts telling me about how the former governor, decided to stop on the side of the road and pick up a chair that he thought was cool that was sitting in somebody's trash. Of course, I'm going, so what must it be like to be the guy who gets up to have his coffee and looks out on his front lawn, he sees Pat McCrory going through his trash. Right. So Pat gets this chair and he brings it into the studio, and it sits in the corner for 2 years. All right. So he sits in it every once in a while. But the thing about it is you saw it. It's low to the ground. It's almost like you're sitting in a preschool type chair or something. It's way low. And so when he would go sit into it, I would think that he was out of the room because he'd be over in the corner, but I couldn't see him because he was down close to the floor. So you had that one aspect of it. And then, he would go months without talking about it. He wouldn't take it with him, home or to the Scott Paget studios. But then one day we had something going on in the studio where we had a lot of people in the room. So we came in one day and it was gone. And you would have thought it was we almost canceled the show because the chair was gone. And then we found the chair. Mike Schaefer, our program director, had moved it to another room. And, all hell broke loose because his chair was gone. We put the chair back. And then, as you can see, he's been gone for since April, and the chair is still sitting in the corner. So if somebody moves it, he goes nuts. But if it sits there, he forgets that it's there. I don't know. I don't know where this is all going.
No, I don't either. Except, well, here you can. Let me see here. Yeah, there you go. Share that one. Can you share that screen? Am I able to share it? There you go. I don't understand it. I was trying to do I was going for the what is it called? The Titanic pose right there.
Well, so Christy, the chair is not comfortable at all. It's for a napping pose or any pose. Trust me, I don't recommend sitting in it for long periods of time. But
now he told you why, though. He told you why he liked this chair, right?
I don't remember him telling me why. He was very protective of it, but I don't know why he likes it.
I thought he said, yeah. I thought maybe I thought somebody said that it reminded him of the governor's mansion, or he had a chair like this at the governor's mansion.
Maybe that's what it was. Now that you say that, I sort of do remember him saying that there was something sentimental about it. But if it was that sentimental, he wouldn't have left it here for 3 months. So, it's the chair that is incredibly sentimental until, the day somebody takes it out, it is. But other than that, it sits there in the corner. So
yeah,
there's the chair story. Let's see. I've had a couple of people on here asking who is David from Asheville. Someone said it's Pete Kaliner. I think Pete and I can both verify that is not the correct answer.
No, I am not Dave from Asheville.
You're recently from Asheville, but you're not
correct,
David.
No, I'm not. Can I say who it is?
I'm not going to say, but you can if you want. I actually think it's more fun when people.
Right. It's not my place. It's not my place. I won't say, but we know who it is. Let's say that.
I could say it, but then again, I don't know that that sort of needs to be a mutual agreement between the governor and me to decide we're going to divulge that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I figured it out. So if I can figure it out,
Meaning, meaning that if I say who it is right now, the next time I see him, he's gonna give me hell about it. So I probably should run that by him first, since David was a big part of that show for a long time.
Oh, was he really? Yeah, I just know he called my show once, and then people thought I was him. So,
hey, well, so he may call tonight. Let's put it this way. Here's what I'll say. I saw David from Asheville today. I said you should call tonight, or you should chime in. So maybe he will.
All right. There you go. That chair doesn't look comfortable enough for a napping pose. The weight loss is. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. What would each of you like to see WBT doing that it's not doing now? I would say pay Bo 3 times as much as it's paying him now. What do you say, Bo? What would you say? Just randomly.
What are we doing that we're not doing right now? Not enough Huey Lewis. Let's see. That's a good question. That's one I may have to think on. I mean, I've already said, I've gone on record saying that I like so much of what we're doing right now. I'm gonna have to think on that one. Maybe by the time we're done, I'll come up with a good answer.
Is that somebody trying to get us fired so they can take our job?
Somebody said on here, what do you think WBT will be like or what will radio be like in 5 years or 10 years? John said that. Where do you see talk radio in 5 or 10 years? I'll say something about that. I think that.
Hey, it's Josh.
That was not David from Asheville, by the way.
That was not Dave from Asheville.
It might be Josh. Josh may be from Asheville. I don't know, Josh. But no, we've touched on podcasting already. I don't, a lot of people like to say that podcasting and digital is going to kill terrestrial radio. I think if terrestrial radio was going to be killed by digital, then it wouldn't exist now. I think, you still get in your car and the stats indicate that we see that terrestrial. Wait. I think David from Asheville is running the words at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, not enough Grateful Dead, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know about you. I think terrestrial radio, if you look at the stats, and I know several people in the industry who've shown me, numbers that they've run, terrestrial radio is very, very resilient. And, I think a lot of the time, the people that tell you that terrestrial radio is dead aren't on terrestrial radio. I think that terrestrial radio has to have sort of a symbiotic relationship with digital radio. You can't do terrestrial radio now and not have a digital component. What we're doing right now is essential to what we're doing on the air surviving, I think. But I think, there's going to be more stuff like this. I'm reading the comments on the side here, and you all obviously like this kind of thing. I like this kind of thing. I'm having a ball here. We don't get to do this very much, much less you and I hang out and talk, Pete. So I think in 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be more and more married with digital. But I don't think terrestrial radio is, even AM radio. I think there's still something to be said for getting in your car and listening to a ball game, or or listening to a live event. And we see it every time. There's a year that goes by. Last year is a perfect example. A year when news events drive people to a place to get information. In Charlotte, North Carolina, people still turn to this radio station when something's going on around them and they don't understand it, and they need somebody to help them, connect the dots. And I'm not saying we always have the answers, but we're always here trying to do it, what you got? Oh yeah. Yeah.
There you go. To your point, I still have it all these years later.
I'm trying to remember where mine is, because I have it
where your rock is. Yeah.
Somewhere.
But that's it. So for folks who couldn't see, that was just after 9/11, WBT was the #1 radio station, and they had those all done up and given to the programming department, I think, or maybe sales got it too. But to your point, yeah.
So where do you see radio in 5 to 10 years?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. If I knew that, maybe I took the third option in Brett Winterble's question, and I could travel in time and see this stuff. I don't know. I'm terrible at predicting that stuff. I've never been one to kind of see around the corners, on things that we're getting ready to pop. I'm more, news guy, not a weather guy. I'm not predicting the future. I'm telling you what already happened. So it's always just been safer for me. but I do agree. Like I note that there are a lot of people that have been predicting radio's death for a very, very long time. I know I mean, it's definitely not what it was as far as like the listenership. And it's one of the, I mean, talking about a neat thing. You were talking about the history of BT, going up into Asheville, that station that I worked at, WWNC in Asheville, they had like the largest share ever recorded was a guy named Scotty Road Armor, who was the morning guy up there. And it was like a 79 share or something like that. It's just like an unbelievable number. But that was from a day, and it wasn't too long ago, but maybe 30 or 40 years ago, where there wasn't anything else. That was it. And nowadays you're lucky. I mean, I think the top stations were pulling like 12 shares up there now. And so the idea that radio goes away, I don't buy. And I've always said this. 20 years ago, I was saying this. Now, it may be different for FM music stations. That may be a different thing. I don't know, because I'm not in that world. But for talk product and for news product, you can never get live local on a podcast. And I know that from doing it for a year and a half. I could be a little bit later. I could record something and push it out afterwards, and I can go in depth on stuff like that. But if it's happening right now and you need to know it right now, then you're going to tune into the radio. And if you lose all your power and you can't charge your phone or your Wi-Fi goes down, you need a radio. So yeah, there's a lot of connection there because it's all spoken word format. And I joke that like a lot of the stuff that I had seen in sort of the podcast industry trades, all of the kinds of advice that they were giving out. And I'm reading through this stuff when I first launched the show, and I was like, well, this is just radio advice. They're just telling people how to do radio. And there's a lot of mechanics that you were talking about earlier that apply in a podcast sense. And that's why I think there are now over like 1 million podcasts, and 90% of them are not very good, but that's okay. Because you can do that. You can make all of these mistakes, and it's not going to cost you an FCC license. You're not going to get fired and all that stuff. You're going to try it. And if you get good at it, then you'll be successful at it. And if you don't, then okay. You're not subjecting an entire city to, Barry Manilow.
Well, and again, I'll kind of wrap up my comments on podcasting here, but podcasting is, I think in many ways the future of what we're talking about, because I think, like I said, for you and me to ignore that the digital part of radio is not an important thing or not something that we need to embrace. For us to ignore that would be it would be suicidal for your career right now, because I think you have to embrace the part of the digital aspect of radio that makes sense for what you do. They told us about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a meeting, I remember, and they said, we want all of you to do podcasts. We don't care what you podcast about, but we want you to have a podcast. We want you to have a digital component of your show that people can go and by the way, we have 3 stations in our building, WFNZ and Mix 107.9. And, Ramona Holloway and Matt Harris too. Matt Harris has a nationally renowned podcast right now about this Alex Murdaugh case that has gotten, he's been on with Nancy Grace and, the Dick Wolf. Yeah. And so Matt has a podcast that's just blowing up. Ramona is probably the most digitally savvy person in our company, or at least in Charlotte. And you're one of those people too, but I don't mean to leave anybody out. But my point is that people saw what Ramona was doing for the company. People saw what was happening in radio, and they said, okay, all you guys on BT, you need to figure out what it is you want to do and go do it. And so we all sort of, brainstormed, and I came up with this Century podcast thing that I started 3 years ago as a build up to the 100th anniversary next year. And I got to tell you, when I started in radio, podcasting didn't exist. But when you find your niche, one of the things I can do is still do my radio show. And then I spent the last 2 weeks, Pete, doing recording episodes. I sat in a room with Bob Lacey for an hour and a half about a week ago. Today, I sat in a room for 2 hours with Steve Martin, who was the original play-by-play voice of the Charlotte Hornets, and the Hornets games used to be on WBT. I can't have that conversation on terrestrial radio right now. Commercials, time constraints, it's just not possible. So what I can do is do my radio show and then say, hey, if you like more of this or you want more detail, come find it here. And you are probably you're one of the most savvy podcasters we have, because you had to do it exclusively for a while. And then you sort of married that with your radio show. And so you're way further down that road than I am. But my point about this is I feel like, and this has ended up being a long answer to a question over here, but I think it's a good topic to bring up, because anybody who's listening and watching us tonight is interested in radio, and not only radio, but talk radio and even AM radio. And so I think the way that it continues, you could either look at it pessimistically, or you can look at it with a lot of optimism, like I do now, is saying, hey, podcasting is just an extension and another place to continue off the air what you hear on the air. So I'm bullish on it.
Yeah, and part of the thing also is one of the jokes I used to make, and I think Kathy gets at this here with her comment, that where else other than talk radio is there intersection between listeners and the venue. Couple things. When I did my stint in television, it always struck me, and I was reminded of something. Do you remember a fellow named Haney Howell? He worked for a while in the newsroom. He was a professor of mine at Winthrop University when I was in college, and but he had said something about how TV tries a lot of time to be radio. And one of the things that I encountered when I went to work in television was there was an idea to, hey, let's get some radio people. There was a news director at the time who liked the idea of getting a radio person like me, or another one was Mitch Kokai. There was another fella, I forget his name, but he would go and find radio talent and bring them into TV, because he's like, I can just show them the camera work. That's easy. Everything else, the radio people already know. And we know how to tap dance. We can talk without a monitor telling us what to say if we have to, right? So we can fill time if the teleprompter goes down. Because if you've ever seen that happen, and Bo, you probably have working in television, it's not pretty when a teleprompter goes down.
So let me interrupt you for 1 second. So when I was at TV for 3 years, I was a producer, and a producer in TV is a lot different than radio. In TV, a producer writes what the teleprompter shows them. And so I very quickly learned the air talent that I was working with, the ones that could ad lib and the ones that could not. And to your point, if I didn't, if the words that I had written, and I mean like the words verbatim, if they went down, you could tell. And,
exactly. It's Ron Burgundy. It really is. Well, no, and so the marrying of the two the podcasting on the digital side and the radio on the terrestrial side, they do different things. And I would often joke about how listen to NPR, and at the end of their programs, you're listening to like This American Life, and I'm hearing, we want to thank all of the producers, and they start reading off this list, and it's like 400 names. I'm like, how many people are working on this program? Like, I walk into a studio and it's a part-time board op and me, and that's it. And I have 3 hours, and these guys have, 6 dozen producers that are doing 1 hour of content. Now, what I have now learned is when you do the podcast, and I did it solo, but if you want to do the longer form types of content, then now you have this venue to do it, which is why it's like really cool that Bo, you're back here just in time to do with the technology now is here for you. The platform is here for you. And you get to do podcasts, because it's like, of all the people that have ever walked through the doors at BT, like, I don't know anybody that would be better suited to do that podcast than you. Seriously. Like, I don't know anybody, because like you're literally, like, you were weaned on BT. You grew up listening to it. It's like you're like every stage of your life has been around this radio station. So all of these people, and you're a sponge on this stuff. You just soak it all up. And so, like, who better to do that than you at this time, at this moment? It's very fortuitous, and everybody gets to enjoy and I was saying actually today, because my producer Ryan said, oh, there went Steve Martin. And yes, no, it's not that Steve Martin. it's Steve Martin from the Charlotte Hornets. And he said, oh yeah, Bo just had Steve Martin in. And I said, I'm sitting here, and like last week it was Rick Jackson, and I got to see Rick. And I said, like, I'm sitting here, and it's almost like, Pete Kaliner, this is, well, not really my whole life, but like, this is 10 years of your career. Like I'm seeing all these people, because I worked with Steve Martin. He hired me to be the Charlotte Hornets Peter O'Donnell guy, and working with him and Bob Licht and Jerry V and Mike Jaminski on the radio broadcast. And so it's like really cool to see these people come through come walk past the glass on their way to spill their soul to Bo for the podcast.
Well, and here's the other thing. It's not lost on me. Not everybody loves hearing about reminiscing. And I think one thing, and it's not just in my situation, but I'm sure you find venues for this. Sometimes there are going to be topics that you maybe want to get into, but it's not going to make sense to go that deep or that long on the air, right? Or right. Something that you're not even going to have time on the air to give it the justice that it deserves. So now I know that sometimes I may go overboard on the history of the station, and I have to pull myself back sometimes. And actually, the podcast has given me the outlet to say, hey, here's a when I do a new one, I'll play a clip of it, and I'll say, if you want to hear more, here's where you go. And if you don't, we're about to go to something else, which is right. Where I sort of like to live anyway. I'm a short attention span guy, and I do a radio show where if you get bored or it's not your topic, you don't have to wait very long for us to go to something else. But there now exists this venue, like you say, where I can go and I can sit down with some of the people you talked about, and I can sit. It's not, there's not a time limit. It's however right. long it takes. And I've been right. doing these conversations lately. And I talked to Bob Lacey the other day, and Bob looked at me and he said, nobody's ever done an interview like that that way about my career. And Bob's not a guy that likes to. Bob's a forward-looking guy. He does not like to dwell on things, and so getting him to sit down and do that was a small feat. But yeah, he looked over at me and said, "I'm glad I did that." And that's what that's what they all have said. And to me, if they look at me and they say, I enjoyed that, I'm glad I did it, then I feel like, okay, then this has been a good thing to do. Meanwhile, the regular radio show can have pieces of that, but you don't have to live in that.
Yeah. So two things. Number one, the people that are going to listen to the podcast want to. It's one of the biggest differences, right? They're going there to get that thing, right? They want to know everything about Bob Lacey. They want to know everything about these people that were part of this station because they care. Obviously, they've taken active measures to get that content, right? So they are there. They want the content. And so you don't have to win them over. The other thing was about the Bob Lacey, and I forgot what I was going to say there. Oh, nuts. Well, it was Bob Lacey saying that you're talking about Bob Lacey didn't sit down to go over this stuff, but you're preserving history. Like how it's like finding a reel to reel of what was it, the original recording or the only recording of like the Rebel Yell. Right there you go. See, look at that
right there.
That's professional. Yep. It was a professional segue right there. Do not attempt that at home. So yeah, but like because I think it was it BT that had the Rebel Yell, or maybe that was WWNC.
No, it was WBT. You're right. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So whatever you think of the Rebel Yell, but like the only time it's ever been recorded was in that studio, and that if you are into history, that matters. So. Capturing people's history. I mean, what's the project that Smithsonian was doing or something where they were just walking around, just interviewing people, tell us your story, and just getting all of these stories for some National Archive project.
Something that I was talking about with our program director, Mike Schaefer, earlier today about what we would talk about tonight. One of the things that he suggested, and I think it's a good one.
Have we hit them all? I
think we've hit most of them, but this is not one that came from the comment section. This is one that maybe he got it. I don't know where he got it, but I think it's an interesting one, given that you're sitting in your studio at home. I'm sitting in my studio at home. A little bit behind the scenes on how we prepare for our shows, because I think like you, I know that I do 97% of my prep for the next day where I'm sitting right now at home. I get to work, and when I walk out of the car, you put a microphone in my face, I'm ready to go. Now, my predecessor, Al Gardner, didn't do it that way. Al Gardner got to the station about 2 hours, maybe even more ahead of time, did all his prep there. I've over the years built a room at my house here, where I can do everything that I want, and I'm most comfortable that way. But I'm sitting in a room where I put together sound and I edit audio pieces, and anything that you hear on the show the next day, I've got a digital workstation here that I work on, and some other, like, a reel-to-reel and a cassette machine and whatever I might need. You're sitting obviously in a similar situation. You got a microphone there, and you and I both, if we have to, can broadcast from here. We've had to do that during COVID. There's the technology in 2021 where, if you have the right piece of machinery, you can transmit from where we are. And I had to do a month back in January when we were put on lockdown. So I've come from this room before. I'm most, at home in the Ty Boyd studio when you have all your bells and whistles at your disposal. But so I'm in the place where I spend most of my time prepping, and I think you're in the same boat, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes. So people ask, and I always say the same thing. It's 2 hours of prep for every 1 hour on air, generally. Some days you get away with less. Some days it's way more. And some days you do all the prep in the world, and then something happens, breaking news, or a caller, and or a Trump tweet, and everything is blown up, and your show now takes on a completely different direction. And no, so I wake up every morning. I get up at 6 a.m. and put on a pot of coffee as it's brewing. I come in here, fire up the laptop. I've got my board, and I start doing show prep. And I do show prep until 10 a.m. Then I go and I get my shower. I get dressed, go into the studio. I'm in there by 11, do the show at 3, pop into the boss's office, usually on the way out. You need me for anything? And then it's come home, and it's prep for the following day. And if there's a city council meeting or a county commission meeting, that's what I'm doing. Usually, 5 p.m. until whenever, usually, 10 or 11 o'clock at night or so on a Monday or Tuesday. So like, that's kind of the day. And it was kind of funny though, that when I first got back to Charlotte, and we did one of the Zoom meetings with all of the sales folks, so they could, meet me, and here's Pete. And somebody asked me, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? I said, this is kind of it, and I kind of like, if I'm not prepping, I'm sleeping or I'm prepping. Like, I don't know. Everything it's always been that way for 20 years. You're always prepping. ABP, you're always prepping.
No, I'm right with you. And one thing I would say is I have to get up a little earlier than you, obviously, because my show starts at 5. So I get up at 3 o'clock every day. One thing I realized really fast when I took over for Al back in 2012, I started out and I tried to do all the prep the night before and then get up. And about 6 months in, the Boston bombing happened. And that was the first story where, when I went to bed and slept for 4 or 5 hours, or whatever night, different hours, that was the first time that when I woke up, everything had changed. The whole story had, because you remember they went on a chase and he was hiding in a boat, and there was a manhunt all night long. And so I got up and basically had to start over. So I built in an extra hour. I would probably be able to get away with getting up at 3:45 or 4, but I realized, okay, I've got to back that up an hour, because I need another hour in the morning to sit down here and get reacclimated for what happened since I went to bed. I mean, last night it was the end of the baseball playoffs. Some night it's the Panthers, some night it's a debate that doesn't start until 9 o'clock between presidential candidates, or, God forbid, a county commission meeting goes into the wee hours of the morning. We have to watch those. I heard you talking about that the other day, and some are more interesting than others, but it's.
When do you sleep though? Like, how much sleep do you get in a night?
It depends. I mean, I have kids that are in high school, and my son plays football, my daughter plays basketball. Sometimes those games don't start till 7 o'clock. So, one of the reasons I was happy to get out of TV working the night shift, about a decade ago, is because, I didn't get to see any of that. And they were younger then, but I knew these years were coming. So, to me, getting up has never been hard. Going to bed at the right time is hard. I was talking to Lacey the other day, and he said the first 3 steps when you get out of bed are the hardest in the morning, and then everything else sort of takes its place. But it depends on, look, the year the Panthers were were making the Super Bowl run, and they played primetime games that didn't end until midnight.
11 o'clock. Yeah.
There are nights where there's one night I remember I slept 45 minutes. The year that Trump won the election, I did election coverage that night and slept for 30 minutes in my car, and then went in and did I did election coverage until like 3:45. Went to my car and then came back in. But I'm not. This is what we do, and quite honestly, in those situations, and this, Pete, when you're going through it, it's you got adrenaline. I got a couple of Red Bulls. But this is what we live for. Are
you ever worried? Like sometimes I will be worried that I'm too sleep deprived and I won't know it, and I would say something that I would regret.
Knock on wood. I haven't had, everything's been okay. So there've been days when I've been tired in there. It's adrenaline kicks in and you do your thing. Election night, I always try to stock up on sleep before election night, because it always tends to go that way. But it's you sleep on the weekend. What can I say?
So here's a question: what is your favorite cheese?
Probably, what's the cheese in the Caesar salad? Parmesan cheese. I guess that's my favorite. I like all kinds of cheese except maybe blue cheese.
Well, no accounting for taste, I guess. I like almost all of them. I don't like the brie. Not a brie fan.
I'm thinking of that scene from Mr. Mom where he's in the grocery line and he's ordering the cheese. You see that? Which kind? Parmesan.
How hard is it to do your show from home? What's that experience like? So you said you prefer the studio versus doing it from home.
Well, I should put I should say it outright that when I do a show, I don't do a show just talking behind the microphone. I control all my music. I control all my sound effects. I have a computer that sits to my left, and I have a sound effects machine that sits to my right. And and like I said, I do all my own audio editing at home. So when I come into the studio the next day, I have all of that stuff at my disposal. So I like to have all my stuff spread out. I would never be happy just doing a show where all I did was talk. And this, I mean, when you first met me, I was the production director for the station, and all I did was sit in a room and make promos and show opens and commercials. And so I could never let go of that. But the show that I do now marries that together. So I say all that to say that when I'm in the studio, our studio, the Ty Boyd studio, I have everything where I want it, so I can do that. The engineers hate me when I go on a remote, because I take my stuff with me. So they have to hook all that stuff. So
he's like the grapes of wrath. He's like going out west in the Dust Bowl, grapes of wrath style, with all of the equipment just strapped to the vehicle.
So as far as doing the show at home, when I first started doing the show at home, I had not figured out a way to be able to use all that stuff. And it was like I had my both arms tied behind my back. I figured out how to plug my system in here to the main board, which feeds our board back at the station. And once I figured out how to do that, I mean, I did my show basically the whole month of January. And I don't think many people knew that it wasn't at home, or that it was at home. So, I take a little bit of pride in that, but obviously I'd rather be where I have all my stuff where I'm used to having it.
Yeah.
How about you?
I will say the convenience of doing the show from home, it saves, like, it literally saves chunks of your life. That's what time is, right? And if you think of time in that way, then you're less willing to make a long commute. So because you're just sitting in a car, right? And that's your life that you're trading. And so if I can save an hour of my life when I just went through, like, this is what I do all the time, and I don't have tons of free time. So if I can get some free time back, I like that. I like the ability to cut out a commute. The downside is, like, right now we're in an apartment. And so, it's I'm always worried there's a fire alarm going to go off. You're going to hear somebody yelling or screaming or dogs barking or whatever. So there's a lot of that stuff that you can't control for. Although I think COVID times have kind of made people a little bit more forgiving on those types of problems that come up. But yeah, so I mean, because I created a studio here, and so I can do what I need to do here as well. You get a different energy when you're in studio, obviously, and it's more of a controlled environment, and so you don't have to worry about any kind of distractions or disturbances and that sort of thing. So I don't know if it's different, if it's terribly different for me, home versus, but because I've done fill-in here. When I was, before I got hired on to do the job here, I was doing fill-in work. So
Right.
yeah, I never, I will say though, you told the story about how the Boston bombing when I started doing the weekend show, I would do what you were talking about. I would, the night before, so Friday night, I would do the Saturday morning show because it would start at 6 a.m. So I'd be up at 5. So I didn't want to have to rebuild a whole show. So I would do it all the day before. And then, so one night I do that very early on. I think it was, well, I don't remember the exact date, but you can look it up because it was the day as I'm getting ready to go to bed. The last thing I do, I check my phone and look at that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg just died. Son of a gun. And now, how do I not do a show the next day that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died? So get out of bed and go back to work and redo the whole. And that's one of those things. And I actually used to tell, when I would go and speak to classes, students, and I would tell them, like, if you're looking to get into the news business specifically, I said, there's a feeling that you should have that gets you up out of bed and makes you drive all the way back into work to make sure that the words you wrote were accurate. And I only know this because it happened to me once when I did a story. I don't remember the story. I don't remember what it was about. It was a city council or county commission meeting because I was there till like 2 a.m, cranking out the copy and the cuts and all of that. Went home, laying in bed, wake up, and I'm like, it's 3 a.m, and I know I made a mistake on something, and I drove back in. So I guess it was probably before 3, because if it was 3, I just would have called John Stokes, because that guy was in at 2:47 a.m. every single morning, like a machine. He was the news anchor for how long? 20 years?
Worked at the station for 30 years.
Yeah. So he was a machine, but he was in there. Like, I mean, you could literally set your clock to him because he had it just down to a science.
Well, I guess I should qualify one thing that I said. If I'm preparing for the show, I want to be where I am right now. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I do 97% of it here. But executing what I prepared, I'd rather be in the air studio. But, I tell you one thing, COVID has taught us all how to figure out how to do it wherever we are. And nobody wants to go through last year again. But I think last year taught a lot of us broadcasters some new tricks that we've had to implement, and will be better for, going forward with how we've had to adapt, just like in any walk of life, not just radio.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of radio's just one industry. I think there are a lot of examples in the private sector that businesses are rethinking, because honestly, like I was thinking the other day, like in sales world, who's performing. I mean, it will be very clear looking at who's performing when you cut the leash and they're off on their own, who's bringing in revenue and who's not, right? Like, you're going to know these things. If somebody who just seemed like they were working a lot because they walked around the office and they talked to everybody, but they didn't actually produce a lot, you're going to know that. And I think COVID and everybody working remotely, you see a lot of people. I mean, I've done stories about it or read stories about it where you've got people that don't want to come back to work, and they don't want the commute. They don't want to do these things. And, my view on it is just like, hey, if they're producing, let them continue producing. But I've said this about government for a long time as well. I used to talk with the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forrest, about this very thing, that if you were building government today, and if you were building a lot of businesses today, you would not build it like we have them, right? you wouldn't need all of the government buildings to do all of the stuff that we use. Like DMV, do you really need all the DMV buildings anymore? So much of that is online now. So I think a lot of businesses are going to be rethinking their capital and their structures and how they do their business.
Agreed. Well, I guess I need to start thinking about. Somebody asked me, when do you go to bed? I need to start thinking about that. Yeah, well, I'm looking at the clock now. We probably ought to land this plane pretty soon. But I think, look, this is the first installment of the Talktoberfest. Now, you hadn't gotten here yet last year when we did the first one, Pete, but last year we had kind of all hands on deck. We had Bill O'Reilly join us for the first 30 minutes. We had the governor, when he was obviously still part of the broadcast team, join us. And that was fun having everybody together. But I remember thinking I had to sort of moderate the thing. And I remember thinking I never got, we had I think we did about an hour and a half, and I felt like we didn't get to so many people. And this is good because I think, you narrow it down to 2 people. And I feel like we've gotten to really get into some stuff tonight and answer some questions. And so I can tell you that Mark Garrison and Brett Jensen are going to do, I believe, the next episode next Thursday night. And then Brent Winterble and Vince Coakley will do one together. And we may, I don't know. There's talks about maybe keeping this going further than that, and maybe at some point having us all together, and maybe even out in an actual brick and mortar space. But tonight sort of reboots and restarts a concept that I think is great for the radio station. I love having some time to talk to you, and the interaction's been great. I mean, this is a great idea that Mike Schaefer had, and I hope we do more of it.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for participating, everybody that joined in the chat. We could not have done, well, I guess we could have done this without you, but it would not have been as entertaining, probably. So we appreciate you guys with the questions. Also, I feel like we needed to set a bar for time. So what did we do? An hour and 20 minutes? I kind of feel like everybody else who comes after us should probably try to hit that too. I mean, no pressure, though.
Well, so the counter up above in the left-hand corner, it says an hour and 24 minutes. So there you go. There's the bar.
That's the record.
There you go. There you go, Brett Jensen. You and Mark, see if you can fill that, pals.
Right. Bo, thanks for your time tonight. I appreciate it. And everybody in the back of the screens here are making it all happen. We appreciate it, Josh. And I think I saw Kiara on Mike.
I want to make sure we thank Josh Vandernoord, because he's been talking to us and arranging how this all works. And tonight is sort of the first one is we're figuring this out all together. So thanks to Josh, thanks to Mike Schaefer, thanks to all of you. This has been fun, and it won't be the last one.
All right. Take care, everybody.